This is the political grid, which is a little bit more informative for understanding where you lie politically in the world. It's a little bit better than the spectrum because there's not as much overlap as there is with the spectrum. And first you need to learn how to read this chart before we dive into the specifics and the examples for each of these. So the way you read this is like this. The y-axis, you have to think of this as if we go back to supply and demand, we used a y and x axis, and we said that this point right here was 0, and as you went further out, either vertically or further outward to the right here, you had a higher number or a higher quantity that way, and you had a higher price the further you moved vertically up. This time it's different, a little bit different. The y-axis this time refers to social issues. Social issues are those issues that typically have nothing to do with money. They have everything to do with values and morality and what you do on your own time and what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. And the x-axis on this graph refers to economic issues, and most economic issues are going to deal with some sort of money. So basically, the further away you move from this point, right down here, either this way, upwards, or that way, you would advocate for more government regulation. That government's role is very much intertwined with that particular issue. So if you're way up here, you think that government has a moral obligation to regulate the lives of individuals, and we'll get down to some specifics of what I'm talking about here in a little bit. And as you move further out to the right, you believe that government has a role in the economy in providing for citizens in that manner as well. And so basically when you take online political quizzes, you're going to find yourself plotted somewhere around this graph right here. And the closer you are here, the less government you think should be involved in your life. And if you find yourself out here or way up in this corner, you're gonna basically believe that government has a role to play in both social and economic issues of your life. So each group here, we've already talked about conservatives and we've talked about liberals. Conservatives believe that the government has a role to play in your life when it comes to social matters. That's why they're up further vertically, but they are closer to the y-axis this way, and that means that when it comes to the economic side of things, the government has to be separated. So we'll start with the conservatives up here. When we talk about economic issues, they believe in the laissez-faire, trickle-down economic theory that believes that if you give tax breaks to those who provide jobs, they will be able to use that extra money to then provide more jobs and incentives to expand their own company, to do things better, and that will trickle down benefits to the workers and eventually to consumers as well. They believe in the free market, very capitalist. The more free the market is, the more free the people are. So they would be heavily against things like Obamacare. They don't think that it is the right of the government. They don't think it is the responsibility of the government to provide those types of economic issues. This would also include entitlement programs, medical care, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security would also be in there. So again, economically speaking, conservatives would say stay out of the lives of the ordinary Americans. But on the social side, the government does have a role to play, a moral code, in other words, to set. So there'd be more emphasis in cracking down on things like same-sex marriage and stem cell research and abortion, and regulating these things and regulating the use of drugs as much as possible to keep them off the streets, and not legalizing marijuana or anything like that. So that's typically the conservative or Republican side of things. This obviously pours into a number of other issues that we'll be talking about in class, which we'll be talking about later. Liberals, will come right down here, are typically Democrats. They are the exact opposite of conservatives. That's why they don't get along so well. They believe that the government has a role to play economically and should provide those entitlement programs and should tax citizens and use this for pensions like Social Security or medical care or Obamacare. That's why Obama, if you've read up on the news, you pay attention, you know that he is a liberal, and that's what he would advocate for. However, when it comes to social issues, the liberals or Democrats believe that the government should play not as big of a role in individuals' lives, meaning that on the social side, abortion should be a pro-choice issue, that not necessarily to legalize marijuana, but definitely look into reforming those types of things, and so on and so forth. Another big issue that I really failed to mention is that same-sex marriage. Liberals are more in favor of that. You can see that with the 14 states that have legalized same-sex marriage. Most of those states lean to the left. They are led primarily by Democratic governors or Democratic Congress within that state. Conservatives, however, and Republicans are against same-sex marriage and are for the proper definition of marriage, or the traditional, rather, definition of marriage of one man and one woman raising a family. Liberals are on the other side, obviously, of that. Other issues could include affirmative action. Liberals believe that government has a role to play there to provide for benefits for those who have been at a disadvantage for a long time. And we'll go through more of those issues in class. Now we're going to look at the other two political groups on this list. This one right here, the Libertarians. These individuals are those who would argue that government has very little role to play in the social lives or the economic lives of Americans. So they're very much separated. Some very prominent libertarians would advocate that government's only role would be for the public safety of the individuals. True libertarians might actually be some pretty good lawyers because they know how to advocate for your rights as citizens, both economically and socially. So they advocate for personal freedoms. A very prominent libertarian today would be Ron Paul, or his son Rand Paul. They are very much libertarians. Gary Johnson would be another one that we might come across, who is a known libertarian. But again, because you're down in this far left-hand corner, in the bottom side, you're saying government stay out of my life socially, government stay out of my life economically. And up here in the upper right-hand corner, we have the authoritarians, the status, the totalitarians, the expert central planners, going back to Lenin and Stalin and Soviet Russia, and basically explaining that the role of government is heavy, and that it should regulate social behavior and it should regulate the economy. We should have a command economy that is controlled entirely by the government, so it is involved both socially and economically in your lives. Distribution of wealth would be another far extreme authoritarian or status viewpoint. Again, so all those issues that we were talking about, no same-sex marriage, definitely provide things like Social Security and medical care, health care, pension programs, so on and so forth. And in the middle here we have the centrists or the moderates. Centrists advocate for changing ideas. They advocate for compromise. Centrists may take some issues over here on the liberal viewpoint, other issues over here on the conservative viewpoint, sometimes libertarian, sometimes authoritarian. So what you're going to find is when you take online political quizzes, you're probably going to fall somewhere around this region right here, because as we said earlier with the political spectrum, most Americans, most people, their political leanings are very moderate. They're right here in the middle somewhere. So you're likely to find yourself somewhere close to this middle inner box, because I'm sure, like most Americans, like most people, your ideas are going to change from time to time.